aviation crisis in India has highlighted how Indigo basically has a monopoly in the field. But is that something we should worry about? After all, Netflix is merging with Warner Brothers, Adani controls almost all of India's ports, and Ambani owns so many TV channels. So why is this something that should perhaps concern us? Welcome to this episode of Seema Says, where The Wire's editor Seema Chishti breaks down recent news and analyzes what it means for all of us. Hi Seema. Let's talk about what I asked. Should we be worried?
I think we should be very worried. And as we've discussed often, monopolies seem to be happening everywhere, globally as well. At the biggest instances, of course, the communication monopolists who rule the Infoverse. There are only four people, big people who are single men run shows, and they control vast amounts of information, determine almost what we see, hear, and think. In various sectors, you have Walmart globally, where it seems like a great idea at first that we'll have one super competent large person who's across all operations. But what happens? They first get in, offering sops, things to consumers, to fellow producers, to the ecosystem, which are just too good to be true. But that's exactly what they are, too good to be true. Because the minute they gain control of the market over a certain desirable minimum or a desirable amount, they can then bully that same market and charge more. They can charge more and they destroy the market. And if something, God forbid, happens to these players, your customers completely crash and suffer. And that way, Indigo is a great kind of a warning at a very high cost about what happens if you allow concentration of power and monopolies in these sectors. These are new sectors. So India's had a record, as have all other kind of developing economies and others, that for more capital intensive industries, there has been a monopoly, there's been a duopoly, there's been a tripoly. But in newer sectors, and this is where India needs to worry, whether it's aviation, whether it is communications, whether it is telecom, by having just a few players, their inability to function just messes everything up for everybody else, and their ability to control the regulator and bully the government, because any collapse on their front makes it so difficult for the government to make those services available. Another example from global affairs is what NASA has done. NASA, by privatizing and allowing just Elon Musk's company to be the people who do space stuff, if they were to completely alienate Elon Musk, NASA would not be able to get its launches out. Even if they wanted a bit of privatization, had that been more evenly spread out, you would have had a better chance at being able to go to the other person, the other producer, should Elon Musk Starlink have problems. So that's there. The other thing, Viral Acharya's paper, which we've discussed on the show earlier as well, in 2023, has actually documented properly, we can put it in the show notes, about how concentration of capital amongst top five big Indian industrial homes has actually increased after 2015. And this has all kinds of consequences also for the prices we pay for those products. Because the minute there's a concentration, there can be an agreement between these large guys and girls to not allow the minimum price, to fall below a certain amount, and consumers suffer. So all in all, it's a dreadful idea, and watching Indigo kind of go down, which controls 65% of the aviation share, and end up bullying the government into relaxing the pilot rest norms for itself, boards really poorly.
The next topic we have for today is actually not a question I had, but something you wanted to talk about, and I'm curious where it goes. Because you said that there are three things you mentioned: Indigo, a Supreme Court comment on the crisis that BLOs are facing in India, and Putin's trip to the country. And there's a thread, you claim, that is running through these. What is it?
Let me explain, as you're suitably mystified with good reason. I was just thinking about the news and wanting to connect what's happening with Indigo, which at the heart of it is, in 2019, the pilots of Indigo had protested against exhaustion and against excessive stress being put on them. The courts had actually insisted that DGCA, the central regulator for civil aviation, to actually have proper norms for them. So these norms came virtually 5 to 6 years ago. They were mandated because of the actions of a pilot union. And now the airplane claims it's finding it hard to follow those norms. So it doesn't have enough pilots, but it describes itself as a lean, mean machine. So it wants to kind of run more planes. It runs 65% of the aviation sector, and all that is happening at whose cost? At the cost of workers, of pilots who work for the airline. Number two, on the BLO thing, reading about these suicides, the distressing tales, the way, and when Supreme Court asked all the state governments to get more BLOs, it seems that the teachers, under a lot of stress, not adequately trained, in all kinds of awful weather, are being asked to shore up this burden of restoring Indian democracy is up to them. They're also workers, primary school teachers, not under the best of conditions, not given adequate respect and dignity for the important work they do. And they're the ones who are going to be rolled into the census as well. They're currently functioning as BLOs and doing this very important exercise. The third thing, the trip with Russia with Mr. Putin actually got India making no announcements on anything other than saying that the rupee ruble trade would continue. There was nothing on space, there was nothing on nuclear, or anything on oil, because India is quite scared, rightly so, of any, because it risks poking, not the Russian bear, but poking the Western countries in the eye by getting too close to Putin. So none of those things were announced. What is the only thing that's announced? The labor mobility agreement. So India will send semi-skilled or basically labor. Russia needs hands. The population there has been dwindling, as we know, as it is in other Western countries and more so in Russia after 1991. And they need 500,000 workers before 2030. And India will supply that. So it just brought down the centrality of the jewel that India has is its human resource, its people, of whom we have a lot of, which we should be looking after, educating them, ensuring state good quality education, training them, and ensuring jobs for them. We have the example of China. I'm tired of giving that example, but they operate at the same scale as we do. There's no point in comparing ourselves to Singapore or Switzerland. But China, one can compare them to, because it's a partner, neighboring Asian country with a reasonably large number of people engaged in agriculture, as they were till many years ago. But what is the importance and the centrality that we put labor to? We don't. They're important for SIR in the election exercise. They'll be important for census. They're important for flying planes. And they are so important in when you negotiate all this with Russia. So you're essentially saying that it almost sounds like something that the entire stories about indentured labor leaving India's shores, looking for jobs, came to mind. So I thought that the whole importance of labor and labor not getting its due. So you have labor codes being announced as if not having an appropriate exit policy is the only problem we have in India. Whereas we need to invert this whole frame of looking at things and putting them at the center of our economy and making things work for them. Because if India doesn't work for Indians, who's it there for? Just cronies and monopolists? I should like to think not.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing I wanted to talk about is that Karnataka has become the first state to introduce a bill specifically targeting hate speech. What is the significance of that?
So, hate speech and hate crimes has been a problem in India for a while, and there's been research by scholars that says that well before even 2014. 2014 is an important marker in many ways, but even well before that, the Indian electorate was kind of rewarding people who indulge in hate speech, who demonized others, and polarization kind of worked it was a good electoral gig. It was a great strategy to employ and get votes. So we have had this problem, but the scale of the problem, the industrial level at which it is going on, and the political backing it receives from people in high offices has made this a hugely difficult problem, along with technology, which helps amplify this. And yet there is no real definition of hate speech in the law. And very recently, the Supreme Court, which in 2018 had agreed to monitor all cases of hate speech and said it'll do its best to look after and to make sure that hate crimes don't happen and hate speech doesn't kind of get everywhere, has said that it's not their job to do this anymore. Very recently that came in. So I think if a state government, the first in the country, is putting out a prevention of hate speech and hate crime bill, which it is supposed to discuss in this assembly session, which is getting underway or is already underway, I think it's really important. It has marked out a punishment ranging from 1 year to 10 years and 50,000 rupees as penalty. And it hopes to kind of extend its rules about hate speech across, whether it's race, gender, it's about region, caste, religion, everything that needs to be told. So I think some organs of the Indian state, Indian authorities needed to get up, stand out, define it, and say that this is not acceptable. Because while hate speech is just seen as, oh, it's just something somebody said, it has huge impact on like people themselves, their mental well-being. They feel stressed, anxiety, trauma at a personal level, at a social level, more than politics. It has, when we hear about people not allowing people of a certain faith to live in the same building, etc., these were not stories that we heard earlier pan-India. And when that's happening, that means that fissures and the cracks have made their way, which to a large extent have been fostered and whipped up by such kind of hate speech and commentary. And number three, the Constitution of India, whereas Article 19 allows everybody free speech, but my right to punch the air stops where your nose begins. I can't go further than that. So that point is driven home by having a law. So even if it plays a big role of being a deterrent in this, I think Karnataka would be rendering yeoman service if they can. They've passed the bill. The state cabinet has passed the bill. But if the assembly passes the bill, that would be quite an achievement.
The last news topic for today that we have is that we know Donald Trump has been really wanting the Nobel Peace Prize. And he's got a Peace Prize, but not from the Nobel Committee, from FIFA, which I'll let you talk about it.
No, I think you have said it all. This act, it's kind of leaves me speechless. There can be like 2 minutes of silence here. We do like say a prayer for FIFA. FIFA with Gianni Infantino has gone on for years about being apolitical, about being neutral. There have been things, little scarves, little Palestinian gestures which are anti-genocide, things for gay rights, for pro-pride, because they were worried that Hungary would get offended, so they did not want like a rainbow shade. FIFA has been like behaving like this and set the trend for no politics in sports. Till 2023, this Gianni Infantino was talking about political neutrality. He's gone and given this Peace Prize to Donald Trump. So there is now a FIFA Peace Prize.
Yeah.
So as a friend was speculating that will they now have a literature and a science and a medicine prize too? Who knows? FIFA may come up with that. It's the first time that they've decided to give this, and it has got critics really angry. And they're saying it's like giving Suarez, who's this Uruguayan forward guy who's known to bite people's ears off, that it's like giving him a peace prize for not biting people's ears off. And the fact that this was announced for Trump at a time when he was like bombing the Caribbean, and it's very controversial the way they've gone and bombed ships, claiming that they're trying to settle issues of narco-terrorism. And at a time like that, when he's openly canvassed for a peace prize, to go give him a peace prize, what is FIFA trying to do? Apparently he's trying to cozy up to Trump and the US administration before the FIFA Cup is to kind of go there in 2026. But to me, it's like a symbol of the entire utter sense of disarray in the kind of international space where people like Trump have actually succeeded, and they ride on the backs of other autocrats who've kind of done their business in the world and eroded norms, what is considered okay, what is considered not okay. So people are saying that this is cringe and this is terrible and how can this happen and all that. But the fact that they're allowed to get away with this, and Trump was very happy, he accepts that Peace Prize, and he was very gracious about it. So that just fills me with horror about what kind of international norms are we really talking about, and thinking about how Usman Khwaja, for talking about peace and talking about peace doves, was deemed political and not acceptable in the sports field because it was seen as signaling for peace in Gaza. It just it's quite galling.
Absolutely. Okay, that's the end of our news section for today. But what would you recommend for us this time?
I have a very esoteric sort of recommendation, but it like kind of really struck me. Vivaldi has this very signature series of compositions called Four Seasons, which are very famous. I didn't realize we're in that 300th anniversary of Four Seasons. And a scholar, Dr. Hannah French, has actually done a very nice book asking the question about why he wrote the Four Seasons, and is it still defining seasons for a whole lot of people who are into Western classical music. So there's a very nice podcast based on her book that I heard. We'll put it in the show notes with your permission.
Absolutely.
And your recommendation?
Yes, my recommendation is a book. It's called Enter Ghost, and it's by Isabella Hamad. It's about a British Palestinian theatre actor who, after many years in the UK, visits Palestine again and somehow becomes involved in the production of Hamlet. And it's about that. It's very lovely.
So, would you like to give any spoilers? How does it end? Just to like hassle our viewers.
It ends with the production.
That's a giveaway.
Yeah. That's all we have for today. As always, if you have things that you would like Seema to talk about, please leave them in the comments and she'll get to them in a future episode. Thank you so much for watching.